Hi, I'm Jade Wilson. Welcome to Stuff Jade Made. Today I'm going to be showing you how to take simple craft store boxes like these and turn them into travel dice boxes with built-in towers. Alright, so to get started on our project today, you're going to need a few fairly simple supplies. We're going to start with a box, some wood pieces. I got these at Lowe's. These are 1/4 inch by 1.5 inch by 36 inch. The length doesn't really matter, just as long as you have enough to get the project done. But having something that's fairly thin like this is a pretty good idea. 1.5 inch fits the depth of the inside depth of my box pretty well. You will also need some balsa wood. This is 1/16 inch by 4 inches. And it's obviously very, very thin, as you can see. And that's going to be some facing material, a front of the dice tower. If you want, you can use some decorative elements. You will need some way to measure the interior dimensions, wood glue, some felt of a color of your preference. You'll probably need some sorts of latches, other decorative elements if you want them. You will want a small miter box and saw. If you have something bigger, go ahead and go bigger, but this is something that you can pick up at your craft store where you find the boxes and these sorts of things. This only cost me $15. And then you're going to need a rough plan. I am going to have a printout available on my blog, which you can pick up at stuffjademade.wordpress.com. And you'll be able to find this post where the video will be posted, as well as the written step-by-step guide. And so I'm going to have a nicer version of this done up that you can download to have all the measurements laid out if you want to use these measurements in this box. You can easily adapt that to do other boxes. I will be doing a book-style box for myself as well. So let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do as we get going here is open up my box and get some inside dimensions. What I want to do is be able to fit my side pieces for the dice tower in the top section here, and I need to know how long to cut those, so I'm going to get that measurement. Now if you're working with something like this isn't the best, but I had it on hand and easy to use. So if you're using something like this, sometimes these can get stretched and bent, so you'll want to go up one or two, however you want to do it, and then stretch it across, but make sure that you adapt for the changed measurement, because if that's not lined up properly, as this is crooked, so you can't tell exactly where it needs to be, but just account for that. So this is showing at just a little under 7.5 inches. So I'm going to probably do it about 7 7/16, I think will fit in there pretty nicely. So I'm going to make a note of that. So I'm going to need 2 pieces cut of that length. So when you're using one of these little miter boxes, it has a ledge here so that you can place it on the edge of a table and press it up so that it'll stay in place. You can also, depending on the build of your table, you might be able to use a vice grip to hold it in place so that you don't have to grab hold of it while you're doing anything else. But so I'm going to get my wood out. And measure and mark. Like I said, I'm using this a little differently. It's 7 7/16, not 8 because of where I'm doing it from. But generally you want to mark in 2 places so that you can get it lined up. So what I'll be doing here is I'm going to cut this at a 90-degree angle, so I'll be lining it up here, cut straight across those 2. Give me just a moment. One piece, and once you've cut the first piece, you can either measure or line up and cut. you'll just want to cut slightly to that edge of it. Got these two guys cut, same length. I'm just going to verify that they fit properly in the box. Very good. A nice snug fit. Very good. We'll be able to get that in very well. But one thing that I want to do before I attach it is I'm going to measure and mark an angle here. I want to make sure that as part of the dice tower, there's going to be an opening near the top. This isn't the full width. This is just for getting things measured out. I want to create an opening up here for me to be able to drop my dice in easily. And so I'm going to cut an angle through here, and then there will be a facing that comes down over the front of this, and then there will be the baffles inside that actually roll the dice down. But so the baffles will start about there, I think, the top one, and we'll make sure that opening is good and wide for dice to go in nice and easy. So I've marked those with my pencil. Now, I'm going to say that was the front edge. That was the front edge, so I know which way to go. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure down. I'm going to measure down an inch. So then now I'm going to mark off. A straight edge right through here between each of these. What I might do is see what angle I can get on my miter box and choose the angle that's closest to that. Okay, so those are coming off. So I wound up going a little bit of a steeper cut than I initially went for. I found out that my miter box has a 30-degree angle cut, so I went from the depth that I wanted for this part, but then just let it extend just that little bit further. So it's still going to work for my needs. I want to place these in the lid of the box, and then I'll be gluing them in place. What I want to do is have these set right about 3.5 inches apart, I think. If they go a little closer, they might not fit the baffles the way I want them to. So I'm going to go with that as my rough guide to start with. So I'm going to line that up right here and make sure the bottom is lined up as well. I'm going to mark just very lightly right through there where it's going to line up with. You can see what wound up happening here is that angle starts right at that very edge there, which I just think is going to work really nicely. Fits inside the box because I chose my depth properly. So I'm going to pull these out, put on a little bit of glue, and stick them back in. Now, if your pieces are not as snugly fitted in here as mine are, if they're a little bit loose, if they wiggle a little bit, you can just use some painter's tape or some other kind of tape to hold them in place while the glue dries. Once the glue dries, this should be a fairly strong and secure hold, but until then, you'll want to make sure that it stays still. So now I'm ready to cut the baffles. The baffles are the little angled pieces that go inside that are going to actually make the dice roll down. So what we have in here, the space in there, is comes out to about 3 1/4. Well, close to 3 1/2. But so what you want to do to make your baffles is make sure that once they're angled in, that you have a good amount of clearance between the end of the baffle and the other wall so that your dice will clear through without getting stuck anywhere. So what I have figured is it looks like if I do about, it doesn't have to be exact, but about a 2-inch baffle, and I put that in and angle it in, then there's plenty of space for the die to roll, but there's also plenty of rolling surface as it goes down, and I can fit 3 of these in here nicely. So I'm going to measure those out and cut those and get them in here. Alright, so I've got my 3 pieces cut for the baffles, and they're going to go in about like so. You want to make sure they've got the clearance they need for dice to be able to get through both from the end to here as well as from this level to this level. You want good clearance on all of those areas. And I just want to make a quick note on this bottom baffle. Now, depending on how you want to do the bottom of this, you might choose to, well, let me just say, the clearance that's needed for the dice to come out of the end here, you're going to have to stop the facing piece a little high. So if you don't care if this shows, you can go ahead and let it go all the way down, however you care to. But if you want it to be hidden, then you will need to make sure that this part does not go beyond where your front piece is going to be exposing it. So that's just a taste preference, however you want to do it. Also, on that fronting piece, if you care to, you can also miter this. It's really a cosmetic choice as well. Just kind of depends on if you care if this comes down, because essentially what's going to happen is as you, excuse me, my bad. If you look here, what's happening is this is going to extend out. If you want, you can miter this upward a little bit so that the front piece does not have this big exposure area here. That is purely taste. Up here, up top, that was functional. I think that this helps make sure that it clears easily when you go to close the box. But down here, it's really just a matter of if you care for it to go smoothly here or if you care if it just sticks out. Totally up to you. But anyway, back to the baffles. I'm going to place these and decide how they're going to go, and then do some lines, glue them down, and we'll run with it. Now, if you're worried that they're going to move around, then tape them in place, but otherwise, got something good going on here. It'll be fine. Now that those are pretty well dry, the next thing that I want to start working on is the ramp. I don't want to put the cover on yet because we're going to be felting in some of this area, and I want to incorporate some of the felting process that happens here in with this for a smooth look and for functionality that I'll explain later. But so to make the ramp, I'm going to make it so that the ramp fits just inside of this when it's folded, so that it'll close. If you don't do it properly, then when you go to try and close the box, it's going to run into the ramp and it won't shut. So you're going to want to make sure that that goes just to the inside. So we'll mark that. Check it a few different ways just to make sure that that's right. And the inside dimension from bottom to top here is 1 inch, just inside 1 inch. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be cutting some more pieces of this. I want to extend the ramp probably about 3 inches or so. What I plan on doing is I'm going to take this, I'm going to measure about 1 inch up. So this is about 1.5 inches, so roughly there. I'll measure it properly in just a moment. And then I'm going to cut, I think probably just my 30-degree angle right through there, and then that should come out about 2.5, 3 inches, somewhere around where I want it to be. So once I've got that, I will glue those in place, glue a top, then we'll start felting, and we'll continue from there. Two pieces cut. Doing it at that angle basically just made it about 2 inches by 1 inch, but I'm not too terribly worried about it as long as it kind of directs it toward the center of the tray. So I'm going to I'm going to line it up with those lines that I did before, and then I'm going to close it just to test to make sure that it closes clearly. If it bumps that one just a tiny bit, so I'm going to scoot it in. Alright, so that's where I want those to be. I'm going to place a new little mark. That can go there. So I'm going to glue those in, and then we'll cut the facing for that ramp part, and we'll get to felting. So I had one of those moments where I realized I have made a terrible mistake. I forgot to account for the slope of the ramp and how far this has to come out. So, my bad. Basically something that you can do is you can cut a piece of 2 inch by 1 inch and then cut the triangle and see if you can cut down the angle on this surface here. I went ahead and pried that out, and what I'm planning on doing is seeing if I can cut that to an angle so that I still mostly have the baffle there, but it'll be able to close properly over the ramp here. This piece of tape simply marks how far up the closest piece comes, because once I go to close it, this point here comes up to here. So I have to make sure that basically the slope of that baffle matches with the slope of the ramp. It's going to have to get closer, shorter here to account for the height of the ramp here, and it can come further out here to account for the shortness out here. So I'm going to take this and see about trimming that down, and we'll be back in just a minute. So the next step that we're going to do is to actually form the ramp. I'll be doing that with the 1/16 inch balsa wood. You can do some math here, or you can just lay some pieces on it and see how they fit as you go. So this balsa wood is really very thin and is pretty soft. You can actually cut this with a good solid box cutter if you're careful with it. So that's what we'll be doing. Let me cut a piece a little over 2 inches, and then we'll work from there. So now the next thing is we're going to go ahead and glue this in. Let me just do a quick test on that other ramp up there. Great, it does close. So I did make a count for that properly. It worked out well for me. So now let's go ahead and get this glued in. Now that I have this all taped up, I'm going to let that dry fully, and then I'm going to do some staining before I start adding in the felt. I'm going to be staining basically anything that's going to be exposed. So what I'm going to do is, this is not going to be exposed and this isn't, but the side of the ramp might, so I might just go ahead and add some stain there. I'm going to be felting around all the inside edges otherwise. So I don't need to worry about them, but I am going to get these top edges, these edges, all of these surfaces through here. I don't have to worry too much about getting the back in here because that will be felted. Don't have to worry about stuff inside here, but I am going to stain the edge and the underside of this as well as the inside of this here probably. Then obviously the back of the box, the side of the box, the edges where it closes. I can remove these by the screws to make sure that I get a nice clean finish on the staining. And I can also do the same back here on the hinges. And then once it's all stained and dry, then I'll just reattach everything and be good to go. So here's my box so far. I have gotten it all stained and went ahead and did the decoration that I wanted to do on the outside. I took the time to, I decided to replace the hardware on it, the hinges and the latch on the front. I decided that I wanted that just for my own cosmetic reasons. You can decide to do that or not at your leisure. So the next stage is going to be getting the inside of this felted. Now I'm going to be doing this basically staged. I'm going to have to be able to get to the inside of this, but when I want to join this section to extend the ramp a little bit, make sure the dice roll properly the way I need them to, I'm going to have to do a small chain from here to here in order to keep the whole box open the way I need it to. So I have my nice big piece of felt. This one's slightly stiffer than some of the other ones that were available. I just got this one at Michael's, I believe. But this large piece should be plenty enough to get the job done. So to get started, I want to get a piece cut for the inside back. And to get me started on that, I'm actually going to do almost like how you do a rubbing. You could actually do a proper rubbing. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now I'm basically going to be using this as a template to cut my felt, and I'm going to tweak it from here, but this is going to be my starting guide. Here, I'm going to go ahead and nip this off. Here I'm going to have to tweak a little bit. Basically, you'll just want to test it a few times to make sure that it's doing what you want it to do. So you can continue to tweak it as necessary to make sure that it fits in nicely. I'm just leaving this because I plan on, like I said, doing an extension into this area. And so I'm just leaving that be. I did notice that there's a slight gap on this end. And so I'm just going to take a little snip of extra paper and tape that on to make up the difference. As far as whether it meets up to all the sides here, I like it because I make sure that that offers as much soundproofing as possible. But if you don't care if it matches up exactly inside, it's going to be covered essentially from here to here. So if you don't care, don't worry too much about it, but you probably do want to make sure that there is felting wherever dice are going to be rolling and knocking around. Alright, so now that I've cut that, I want to measure and cut for the baffles. And to do that, these were 1.5 inch deep and 2 inches long is what I measured previously, so I'm going to measure and cut that here. Go figure, after I do the hard part, I find my good ruler. So we're going to go with 1.5. The last thing I'm going to do is actually take down the width just slightly, because I'm going to be felting the back and then the underside of the facing piece that's going to go here, and so that's going to take a little bit of the width, and so in order to keep things nice and smooth, I'm going to narrow the felting that goes down these just slightly. I'm just going to mark this guy off for that one when the time comes. That way it's already all worked out. Whenever you're working on the interior, you don't have to go all the way up to anything. If it's hidden, that's entirely up to you if you want to go ahead and do that. You do want to make sure that as the dice roll down that it's going to strike felt. So just make sure your felt comes up far enough for any falling dice to hit it. And then I'm just going to do it on this side for cosmetic reasons. So I'm just going to mark that. Okay, next piece that I want to measure for is going to be the bottom. I want to make sure that I have a little excess for the ramp area. Alright, now that fits quite nicely, so I'm going to snug that down and press into the bottom of the ramp so I know where it ends. And then I'm going to go in and rub those. Much better. Okay. So from here we've got all the pieces that we need except for trimming up the sides, which I may wait to do those. Yeah, I'll wait to do those after. Because some of this stuff has to be unified. So let's get going on explaining that. What I want to happen is when I install the felt, I want these two pieces to become one piece, so that, as you can see right through here, it creates that nice little curvature. I basically just don't want that ledge to continue being there so that dice get stuck on it or anything like that. So what I need to do next is figure out, well, honestly, first I should go ahead and install my my loops and my chain. So to get a nice 90-degree angle, to get it to stay here, I'm going to install a chain to keep it from flopping all the way open and flat and being useless. So I'm going to go ahead and pull out these. I will probably paint the heads of these black later. But I believe I'm just going to measure out, about 3 inches out. Well, I'm having trouble with my big old fingers in these, so I'm going to go ahead and see if I can go drill a pilot hole. If I've got a drill small enough to do that, I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll be right back. Well, it took me a minute. I didn't have the appropriately sized drill bit, but with the help of some pliers, some elbow grease, we got them in. Next, I'm going to take, I just got a just a necklace chain. You can buy these, or you can buy a chain by the yard, or whatever you think best suits your needs. And I'm just going to use this. I like the color of it with the other details. So what I want to do is, I think I'm going to start just by opening that up, that jump ring there. You find the seam, and then you bend it open. I can save that for some other project. And this chain has 2 sets. Each link is two links together. So I'm just going to have to open both of those up and clamp it onto one of these each. While I determine how long I need this to be for a 90-degree or close to 90-degree angle. I think I'm going to let it tilt back just ever so slightly. Yeah, sure. Okay. So I want those lengths, but not the ones beyond it. On just one link so that I can undo it easily here in a minute, and that will make more sense. Okay, so that's how it's going to set, and so now I can determine this slope and how long this needs to be. So I'm going to push that back because I want it to be firmly attached here, but then let that slope continue that way. I'm just going to tape it in place. That tells me once the felt is installed, it's going to go up. There's going to be a little curve through here, and when I glue it in, I'm going to glue it firmly to the ramp and glue it firmly to just below here, and then from there I'm just going to let it go so that when I go to close it, that will just bend up and then flex with the curve. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect this for now. So I have my large piece of felt and I have my primary piece that I need to cut. This I want from all one piece. I'm probably going to trim that up. I'm going to be trimming up the sides with additional felt, so if it's a little underdone, it should be okay. Now when you look at your felt, you might notice, just depending on your felt, that one side looks a little smoother and one side looks a little rougher. This one definitely has that, and so I want this side to be the side that shows. So this is the way that it is naturally. I want to flip it over this way so that when I cut it and flip it back the other way, it works, it matches. So I'm going to be using a marker to mark everything out, and I want to do it on the back so that it doesn't show. And line that up, bottom edge, use these nice square edges to keep everything nice and square where I can. And I'm just going to weigh it down a little bit and help it stay in place. And start marking. And then start cutting. There's that piece. It looks quite nice. So I'm going to test that out. Very good. So it's doing just what I wanted it to. Coming up and then creating some curvature there. Very good. So I'm going to pull that now. We'll glue that in a minute. Next, I want to cut those baffle pieces. I'm going to cut to this one next. And then we'll cut another piece just like this, but then I'll be trimming off that excess. And then for this section here, I'm just going to cut a good chunk. Alright, so to work with contact cement, you're going to put down a good layer on both surfaces that you're going to bond together. So in this case, the surface just inside the wood here and the surface of the felt. And what we're going to see is we need to let it dry, and then I'll flip it over and start installing it essentially. And when you do it, you want to make sure that you are placing it very carefully. Once it's touched, they bond pretty instantly. And if you want to try and pull it out to try again, you're probably going to damage your felt. You'll have to clean up the area, cut a new piece, all that kind of thing. So start with that, let it dry. I'm going to start by aligning the front edge and then tucking it back the rest of the way. Use toothpicks or other tools and install it nice and smooth. And yeah, that's already not going to come out. I'm going to save these for later, because I want this in and then to have these sitting on top. So the next stage is going to be putting the glue across this and here, and then installing that very carefully. Now luckily, because it's just that little bit tight, I should be able to kind of drift that down little bit by little bit. Hopefully I don't mess it up. Open a window for some extra ventilation, so there may be a little extra background noise, but wanted to go ahead and get this. I was a little overzealous with my glue, so I stuck a piece of paper down in here to be between the contact cement and the two pieces. And start pulling this in. Loosen that up a little. Well, some of that won't be seen as much just because of the angle it's at, so it probably would have been okay, but alright. Press it firmly into place. You've got a roller, go for it. But now before I install the bottom portion, I'm going to go ahead and do those guys. Here, I need to rejoin these so that it can be at the right angle for me to install this properly. Yeah, that's good. Okay. So now I'm going to work a little differently. Just planting that under there to tilt it up and start applying. Now I don't want to go all the way to the end here because I want some of that to have some give and flex between this layer and the upper layer. So I'm just going to stop right about here. Now work on the inside. Alright, then we'll leave that to dry for a little bit and come back to it. Okay, now I'm ready to join the felt to the bottom portion. Like before, or rather like I did over there, I'm going to block off some of it with paper while I get it laid in, just so that I'm sure that I can get things aligned properly before they get set in stone, as it were. So just press all that nice and firmly into place, especially well around the edges. Now something that I will note, because I made a small mistake, so I just want to teach you as I learn. When I felted the sides in here, I didn't quite account for the space on either side of the ramp, so it does stick just a little bit. But ultimately it's not too big a deal, and I think it'll work out fine. Now we're getting there. At this point all I have to do is felt the inside edges and then take care of the frontage piece here, and then we're done. So, just a quick little experiment to show you the sound and the sound difference, why you actually want to go through the trouble of felting it properly. This is what it sounds like unfelted. Same dice. Here we go. Isn't that just so much better? Listen to that one more time. Let's do it again. Now compare this to this. Isn't that just so nice? And even down here on the bottom, it just sounds so much better. And it's not as disruptive. And if you're trying to play a quiet game, it's that little bit better. Step is going to be to put the fronting piece on this. I'm also going to be putting some extra felt on the inside of it. I will essentially use the template that I cut previously to make sure that I can still get the ramps glued on properly. But aside from that, I need to cut a new template piece. So I'm going to make sure that it extends from where I have this miter ending right here. There's a little bend, and then all the way down until within I believe it's the 2 inches up from this bottom edge to account for the ramp, so that it can lay in here nicely. So I'm just going to use a scrap piece of paper for that and measure it out. And then I'm going to measure 2 inches up from here, which is right there. Now I can mark here because I know, excuse me, I can mark here because I know that it's going to be covered. measure between that mark and here. Oh, right at 4 inches. Fantastic. Let me double check over here. 4 inches. Oh yes, very nice. So yeah, it comes down, that shows just a little bit, but based on everything else that happened, I knew that was going to be the case. So I'm going to cut a piece of my 16th inch balsa wood. So now that I've got that piece cut and it looks like it's going to fit nicely, I need to mark my my felt template to be sure I know where to begin it in my felt. So I'm going to take it, go ahead and set it in place, just as if it was going right back where it was. I'm going to be just a little bit more generous on this top line because there's already some felt installed at the other angle, or rather on the right on top of the baffle. Alright, and so that is ready to go. Last couple steps. We need to glue this onto here, and we'll get to placement here in a second, but the first thing we're going to do is apply that contact cement again. That's how we're going to get the placement right. I'm going to take the box and get this set in roughly and distance it just slightly so that when you place the facing on, it doesn't just automatically stick. So set it down just that little bit, and we're going to take the facing piece, get it set roughly, well, not roughly, right about where you want it to be. And then we're going to lift that piece. Here, lower that just a little bit. Lift that piece up into it. Get it to tack just a little bit. Come on. Okay, and pull it out. Stick it the rest of the way. So, very last step. We're going to take a little bit of that wood glue. Apply it. Check for no seeping glue. Let it set and dry.